I'm David from Levika Photography, and today I'm going to tell you why I hate zooms. A lot of you guys ask me to review zooms, and I do occasionally when I come across them, but realistically, I hate them. You guys should understand why. So here's why. The first thing we have to look at is lens design. So here's a prime, and this is a very standard prime. This is a 55mm f1.2. As we focus the lens in and out, let's say if it was attached to the camera and the camera was right here, we'll pretend my finger is the film plane. As we focus in and out, all the elements in this lens are grouped together into a barrel. And the barrel is moving back and forth, and it's moving away from the film plane. So if I'm focusing in on an object, it's moving away from the film plane to focus in on it. When I'm focusing at infinity, it moves closer to the film plane. This is how lenses focus. Very simple. Now, with a zoom, typically you have more elements which cause more light diffraction, which makes them slower, which gives them crappier corners because there's more to correct for. These elements, as you're zooming out, stretch out. They actually move apart from each other. Not a big deal. There are some good zooms out there. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, short focal length zooms are usually pretty good, but they usually only cover 2 primes. So to give you an idea, what I consider the top 3 zooms on the planet. Now these are technically sharper, have better corners, and less chromatic aberrations than primes. There's only 3 out there. Those 3 are the Canon 11 to 24 f4 bulbous USM right here, the Nikon 14 to 24 f2.8 right here, the Tamron 15 to 30 f2.8 right here. These 3 lenses are outstanding in image quality. They are actually better than the wide-angle primes that you can get at those focal lengths. That makes them the only zooms that are better than primes. Now outside of that, there are some good zooms. Now to give you an idea, 70 to 200, pretty much from every manufacturer, as long as it's a consistent f-stop of f2.8 or f4, is going to be good. That will give you excellent image quality that you can live with, but there's still issues. I'll get to that in a bit. What are the other good zooms out there that I actually really like? There's only 3 other zooms besides the ones that I just listed. The Sony Alpha 16 to 35 is an exceptional zoom. And before these gigantic ultra wides that I just told you about, this is a close contender to where the image quality of this lens is the equivalent of what you would get with a prime at those focal lengths, but it's not perfect. The Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8 on APS-C size is an outstanding lens. It's almost equivalent to the primes that you can put on there at those focal lengths. And then last but not least, the Sigma 24 to 35 f2 for full frame, same concept. Again, it's close, but it's not quite as good as the primes that you could put on there. Why is that the case? Well, with short focal length zooms, this is considered a short focal length zoom. Is this really better than 2 primes? Not really, because the size and the weight factor becomes problematic. Now this one's a vintage f2.8 35 to 85, and this has some issues with it. You know, photography wise it seems to work okay. One thing I like is when you focus in and out with this lens, the front barrel doesn't move. That's a good thing. But when you zoom in and out, the front barrel does move. That's problematic. So, you know, this will screw you up for video. Still works fine for photography, but realistically this is not better than 2 primes. This is a similar contemporary kit lens that's very close to the same focal length. This is 35 to 80. It's much smaller, it's much lighter. Now you're thinking, oh, there's a very portable lens I can use. Not really. And here's where things go wrong. This is a variable aperture, and this goes from f4 to f5.6. This becomes problematic. Things get dimmer as you zoom in. You don't really want that. A lot of kit lenses go from f3.5 to f6.3. Very problematic. Again, it gets dimmer as you zoom in. You don't want that. Now, the other thing is, usually when you see that designation of a variable lens, that's just going to tell you that it's giving you a different focal length, but they're just throwing it out there as an extra option. It's really not a very good lens. Usually these can be sharp enough, but here's the issue that I have with zoom lenses. The light transmission rating. Nobody ever talks about this with zooms. And this is where everything goes wrong. So this is a Nikon 20mm f2.8 prime. This has a light transmission rating of T3. Now, a T-stop is very similar to an f-stop, but an f-stop is a calculated measurement. For f-stop theory, I won't go into that because it'll make this video too long. Look that up yourself. But it's a calculated measurement. And what f-stop does is accurately calculate pretty much the depth of field. It doesn't accurately calculate the amount of light going through the lens, but it does give us a good idea. This is f2.8, but the actual T-stop rating, the light transmission rating, is 3. Now those top 3 lenses that I just told you about, the Tamron 15 to 30, the Canon 11 to 24, and the Nikon 14 to 24. The Tamron has a T-stop rating. It's rated at f2.8. It's 3.3. The Canon is rated at f4. The T-stop rating is f4.5. The Nikon 14 to 24 f2.8 is actually very good with a T-stop rating of 3.1. Now these are exceptions to the rule. If you go to the 16 to 35 rather than using this, then you get a T-stop rating of 3.4. If you decide to use a telephoto lens, and like the lens I said that was good just a second ago, the 70 to 200, and here is a 70 to 200 for Canon FD, but the biggest problem is this is f4. The only reason why I showed you guys this old one is because that's the only one I've got that's telephoto. But 70 to 200 at f4 has a T-stop rating of 4.7. The Sony 24 to 70 f4 and 28 to 70 f4, which I just reviewed, has a T-stop rating of 4.4. Now, why would you want to use that over a prime that gives you, this is a 55mm f1.2 with a T-stop rating of 1.3. Why would you want to use that over this? This is simply going to allow a lot more light in, and when it's stopped down to f2, this thing is phenomenal, and you still have a T-stop rating of f2.2. Let's talk about the super zoom that you guys have asked me to review. Now that I've given you this knowledge, what do you think I'm going to say about the super zoom? It's just terrible. So super zooms are essentially 2 prime lenses, or a prime lens and a zoom, stuck together. I mean, if you actually look at the manufacturing data, that is literally what they are. And why do I say that? Because super zooms have 2 convergences in there. Now the convergence is where the light comes through the element, comes down and crosses over each other and comes back. Well, in super zooms that happens twice, once in the front, once in the back. Now that's how they make the whole thing compact. We're talking about lenses that are 18 to 200, 24 to 240, stuff like that. Terrible, terrible lenses. Super zooms are always variable because there's no way to keep that in line. It's just too much of a mess. A typical super zoom has a light transmission rating of T6 to T6.8. That's how much light you're actually losing by using one. So much easier to carry 3 primes for the full frame format equivalent of a 20 millimeter, usually a 50 to 60 millimeter, and a 100 millimeter, somewhere in that range. Now I've got 3 different camera systems, full frame, APS-C size, and micro four thirds, but those are always the equivalent of what I just said. APS-C size, I carry a 12 millimeter lens that gives me a focal length of 18 millimeter, and on micro four thirds I carry the same 12 millimeter, which gives me a focal length of 24 millimeter. So it just depends on how you look at it, but realistically primes are way better than zooms, simply because with zooms you just choke the crap out of the light. I mean, you're just strangling the light. Without a lens, we have 500th of a second at ISO 400. Once we put our zoom at f2.8 at 45 millimeter in front of this, that drops down to 1/25th of a second. And if we use a prime of the exact same focal length, the little 45 millimeter f1.8, and stick that on there, we've got 1/60th of a second. That's a huge difference. Now, just to give you an idea, we'll go ahead and put this on here, and then we will increase this to f2.8. This is at 80th of a second at f2.8. If we put our tankage zoom on there at f2.8, we get 40th of a second. Half. That's costing you half the speed at f2.8. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling. So I hope you guys liked this video. I hope you found it informative. Give me a thumbs up. Otherwise, we'll talk to you later. See ya.